Private Detective Deborah was doing some shopping at the mall. Suddenly she heard people arguing. The woman went there and saw a stressed shop assistant and several people crowding him. The poor man had found a smartphone and made an announcement, and now several people claimed it was their phone. One man said the phone must have slipped from his bag. A young woman said the gadget belonged to her, and an older woman shouted it was her husband's device. That's when the phone rang. For some reason, the shop assistant handed it to Deborah. The woman glanced at the screen and immediately gave the phone to the man. How did she understand whose device it was? Deborah saw the word wife written on the screen. Emily has 2 glasses filled with water. In the first glass, the water is heated up to 100 degrees. In the second glass, the water is cooled down to minus 100 degrees. The girl drops 2 coins in the glasses at the same time. Which coin will reach the bottom faster? It'll be the coin in the glass with the warm water. The coin in the other glass won't sink at all. The water there is frozen. Jacob and his brother Jack were walking along the street. When they passed a grocery store, Jacob pointed at a young woman and exclaimed, "Oh, my niece is over there." His brother answered, "Oh, right, but it's not my niece." "How come?" The young woman is Jack's daughter. Ashley had a boyfriend, Mark, who was madly in love with her. Unfortunately, the woman didn't love him back. Once, she decided to leave him. Ashley knew Mark wouldn't let her go easily, so she ran away. But Mark was a very rich man and could find her almost anywhere. She had to be careful. 1 week later, Ashley was sitting in her hotel room when she heard a knock at the door. When the woman opened the door, she saw a man. She had never met him before. The stranger apologized. "Oops, I'm sorry, my bad. I was sure it was my room." He then turned around, went down the corridor, and disappeared in the elevator. Ashley rushed back into her room and started to pack her things. She instantly knew Mark had found her. How did she figure it out? No one will knock on their own hotel room door. It was Mark's man who was looking for her. The faster you run, the harder it is to catch this thing. What is it? It's your breath. David and his wife Jessica moved to another town. The place wasn't big. For the locals, new people coming to live there was a big deal. That's why, the next day, the couple's curious neighbors came to say hello. Karen introduced herself and said she was sure they'd become great friends. She had even cooked cupcakes for David and Jessica. Elderly Mrs. Latham told the newcomer she'd been living in the town for almost 80 years. Betty was extremely excited. "A man's come to live in our small town. And so good-looking at that. Awesome news." 2 of the neighbors seemed a bit creepy, and only one looked normal. Who was it? Karen had decorated her cupcakes with something that looked suspiciously like eyes. Betty is too enthusiastic about David. As for Mrs. Latham, she is sure to know lots of things about the town and its inhabitants. She can be a useful source of information, and she cooked them some soup. Brandon's wife told him to cook several eggs, but the man had to boil them for exactly 2 minutes. She left her husband 3 hourglass timers for 3, 4, and 5 minutes. How can the man boil the eggs for exactly 2 minutes? Brandon waited until the water started to boil. Then he turned over the 3 and 5 minute timers. When the 3-minute timer ran out, he dropped the eggs into the water. And when the 5-minute timer ran out, he had his perfectly boiled eggs. It was the first time Eric sailed his brand new yacht. But the man seemed to be out of luck that day. A bad storm sank the yacht, and Eric hardly had any time to make it to the surface. Half conscious, he ended up on some beach. In the morning, the man realized he was stranded on a tiny, uninhabited island. No radio, no cell phone, no means of communication whatsoever, and the island had no trees to make a smoke signal. On the third day, Eric noticed a small plane circling in the sky over the island. Were they searching for him? But the aircraft was flying too high, and the pilot couldn't see Eric. And still, the man did something, and soon he was picked up by a rescue helicopter. How did he attract the pilot's attention? Eric picked up some stones and used them to write SOS on the sand. Helen lives in Singapore with her husband Dennis. Once, she tells her husband she wants to visit her aunt who lives in Italy. Dennis doesn't mind, but he asks his wife to send him a photo as soon as she gets to Europe. When Helen lands in Rome, she sends Dennis a selfie. Under the picture, she writes, "Ciao from Italy, I've just arrived." After looking at the photo, Dennis realizes his wife lied to him. How did he know? In the picture, the clock on the wall shows exactly the same time as the clock in the kitchen, which is in Singapore. If Helen was in Rome, the clock would show a big time difference. One day, Christopher decided he had to develop his logical thinking skills. The guy found a tutor and started visiting him to have private lessons. But this teacher had one interesting habit. Closer to the end of each lesson, he always gave Christopher several riddles. The guy wasn't allowed to go home until he solved them. This Friday, the first riddle went like this. How can you make 6 into an odd number? Tricky. How? He removed the letter S and got IX. That's 9 in Roman numerals. But the guy knew it was just the beginning. The next riddle was even more difficult. It's thin, but when water splashes it, none seeps through. When hit, it changes color. It covers an incredibly complex thing, yet it's very easy to flex. What is it? At first, Christopher didn't have any idea. Duh, he'd have to stay and crack riddles till midnight. Luckily, in a moment, it dawned on him. It's the skin. Christopher's tutor was impressed with the guy's progress. "Okay," he said, "one more riddle and you can go home." 3 doctors said that Ryan was their brother, but Ryan claimed he didn't have any brothers. Who was lying? Christopher figured out right away that everyone was telling the truth. All the doctors were Ryan's sisters. Whew, he could finally go home. The morning after a heavy snowfall, Justin went outside and stopped in his tracks. He saw there was twice as much snow on top of his garage as there was on his neighbor's. Still, Justin didn't get surprised or upset. Why? Justin's garage is twice as big as his neighbor's. No wonder it also has twice as much snow. Amy went on holiday to the seaside and met 3 guys there. They were friends, but it didn't stop all of them from trying to impress the girl. In the evening, they all met in a restaurant to have dinner, and the guys started to tell Amy about their adventures. Sam boasted, "I'm a pilot, and I've already traveled all over the world." Larry said, "I once took part in an expedition to the North Pole. It was amazing. I saw penguins and polar bears." Jerry barged in, "And I'm an astronaut. When I was in space last time, I went on a spacewalk. I wanted to see our planet from above, but I was almost blown away by a strong wind." Who's lying to make a better impression? Both Larry and Jerry are lying. Penguins live near the South Pole, and there's no wind in outer space. It's an almost perfect vacuum. Andrew and Gary are twins. They were born just 1 minute apart, and Andrew is the elder of the two. But for some mysterious reason, they celebrate their birthdays 2 days apart once every several years. How is this possible? Andrew was born at 11:59 p.m. on February 28. It wasn't a leap year. So Gary, who appeared just 1 minute later, was already born on March 1st. That's why, during leap years, they have 2 days between their birthdays. A famous scientist went missing. The last time his colleagues saw him, he was in his laboratory. When the police arrived, they found a calendar lying on the man's table. There were several numbers written in pencil at the bottom: 6, 4, 9, 10, 11. The police officers had 5 suspects: David, Sarah, Jason, Betty, and Kevin. Who is behind the scientist's disappearance? It's Jason. The numbers stand for months, and the first letter of each month spells the name of the criminal. So the 6th month is June, and the first letter of June is J. The 4th month is April, and the first letter of April is A, and so on. Smarty pants. Here's a quick joke. 2 geniuses are walking down the street. One genius says to the other, "Hey, you look down in the dumps. What's the gray matter?" I didn't say it was a good joke. Okay, you big-brain person you, here's another challenging quandary of riddles to solve. Ted is a lucky game show winner. He can pick one of the 3 prizes: a brand new Mercedes, a Louis Vuitton purse, or a MacBook. Which one should he choose? Think carefully, he can only get one prize. Look at the Mercedes. Its logo is wrong, so it must be fake. The same goes for the purse. That's what Louis Vuitton's real logo looks like. But the MacBook seems to be okay, at least at first sight. So let's go for it. A car thief appeared in a little town. Every night, a car went missing. First, it was Mr. Smith's red vehicle. The next day, it was Mr. Holmes' pink car. And last night, it was Mrs. Tanner's white Ford. The town's detective is going to stop the criminal. Take a look at the 4 cars that are still out there and help the man understand which car is going to be stolen next. There are 4 cars left: yellow, blue, green, and black. The first car that was stolen was red. The word red has 3 letters. The next one was pink. There are 4 letters in pink. The third vehicle was white, and the word white has 5 letters. It means the next car to be stolen is going to be yellow, because there are 6 letters in this word, as best I can count. Mr. Jones was going on vacation. In the evening of his last day at work, he cleaned up his office and left, taking the key with him. When the man came back 2 weeks later, he immediately realized someone had broken into his office while he had been gone. How did he figure it out? Mr. Jones cleaned everything and took out the trash. But have a look at the garbage can now. There's some paper inside. Esme got lost in the forest. She was wandering around all day long and couldn't find a way out. Finally, at dusk, she saw a spooky house where a witch lived. Esme had nowhere else to go, so she entered the house and asked the witch to help her. The witch offered Esme to play a game. "I'll tell you a riddle. If you get the answer right, I'll take you out of the forest. But if you make a mistake, I'll keep you here as my maid forever." Esme had no choice but to agree. Here's what the witch said. "It has cities, but doesn't have a single house. It has mountains, but not a single tree. It has water, but no fish. What is it?" Can you help Esme? It's a map. Students got an assignment for their summer break. They had to start learning a new language. It could be any language they like. When a new semester started, the teacher asked the students how it had been going. Mark said he had been learning Brazilian and enjoying it. Genevieve said she'd chosen Ukrainian. Ben said he had been learning Arabic. It turned out to be very hard but interesting. But the teacher didn't believe one of the students. Who was lying? She didn't believe Mark, who had said he had been studying Brazilian. There's no Brazilian language. People speak Portuguese in Brazil. Oliver came back home and found a love letter in his mailbox. It was a very sweet one, but the sender didn't write their name. However, there was a little note at the end. J+1, B-1, R+2, H-3. Oliver has 4 suspects: Jane, Alex, Leah, and Kate. Can you tell which one of them wrote the love letter to Oliver? The note is the hint, of course, and the alphabet is the key. J+1 means the next letter in the alphabet, which is K. B-1 means one letter before B, which is A. 2 letters after R is T, and finally 3 letters before H, there's E. So, the secret admirer is Kate. Well, a very rich gentleman was having his 3-month vacation. 3 months? His mansion was burgled. The police were notified and the detectives started the investigation. There were 3 people caught on the security camera. They were interrogated. Max, the owner's old friend, said he had come several times to collect the mail. Gwen, the housemaid, said she had visited 3 days before to clean the house. Ronnie, the gardener, said he had been coming every week to take care of the garden. All of them denied stealing anything, but the detective didn't believe one of them. Who was lying? He didn't believe Gwen. She said she'd cleaned the house 3 days before. But look around. There's dust and dark stains everywhere. It doesn't look like it's been cleaned recently, so she must be lying. A long time ago, in Norway, a princess was taken away. She was locked in a small room on a tiny island in the middle of a huge lake. Even if she managed to get out of the room, she wouldn't be able to reach the shore. On the island, there were no trees or any tools she could use. It means she couldn't build a boat. And still, half a year later, the princess managed to escape and returned home all by herself. How did she do it? It happened in Norway. It's cold there in the winter. As soon as the lake froze over, the princess walked on the ice and escaped. Mrs. Brown called the hospital and said her husband had been hurt. When the doctor arrived, she led him to the bathroom. The man was lying on the floor inside. She said the bathroom door had been opened, and she saw everything when it happened. Her husband was washing his hands but slipped and hit his head on the sink. The doctor didn't believe her and called the police. Why? Look at how the man's lying. His head is on the opposite side of the sink. He couldn't have fallen like that. A tired mother of 3 daughters came home late after work. She found the kitchen all messy. It seemed one of her daughters made a sandwich but didn't clean after herself. The mother walked upstairs and found all 3 of them doing their homework. She asked who had made the sandwich, but all the girls, Hannah, Della, and Emily, denied making one. Still, the mother could tell who was lying. Look at the kitchen and the girls carefully. Who do you think is guilty? And how did the mother understand who was lying? There's some butter on the right side of the knife. It means the person who made the sandwich is left-handed. There's only one left-handed girl in the family, and that's Emily. So it must have been her. All the money from the city's bank was stolen right in the middle of the day, but no one noticed that. Several days later, the room where the money used to be stored was found completely empty. There was just one note saying 7718. The police arrested the three most known criminals in the city, Bill, Mark, and Cole, but the officers didn't know which of them was guilty. They invited a famous detective to crack the mysterious note, and he managed to do it immediately. Can you do it too? Turn the paper upside down. This way, the numbers turn into a name, Bill. He must be the culprit. Now wait. If Bill isn't quite that dumb to name himself, did someone else frame Bill for the robbery? Hey, just thinking out loud here. Moving on. Devian found his friend Aaron in his room. The guy was poisoned. Devian called the police. When the officers arrived, he told them he had been walking past Oliver's house and noticed the light in his room was on. He came up to the window to check who was inside, his friend or his brother. It was cold and there was frost on the window, so he wiped it away to see who was inside. When Devian saw Oliver lying on the floor, he called the police. The officers didn't believe the guy and immediately arrested him. Why? Devian said he'd wiped the frost off the window to see better, but he couldn't possibly do it. Frost forms on the inner surface of the window. Now, let's check how well you know logos. In each pair, you'll have to pick the correct one. What does the Apple logo look like? Try to recall the one on Ted's MacBook. The second logo is correct. Okay, here's Instagram. Do you remember what its icon looks like? Yes, this small dot must be in the right corner, so the first logo is correct. I bet you see it every day. What's the real Google logo? It's the second one. First the red O, then the yellow one. Which one is the correct Burger King logo? Of course, it's the second one. Now I'm hungry. If you play video games, you must know it. If not, well, try yourself. Which PlayStation logo is correct? The second one. Okay, now, a tough one. Which TikTok logo is correct? It's the first one. Check it out if you don't believe me.